you very much for joining us today. My name is Gonzalo Navarro. I'm the Executive Director of the Latin American Internet Association, ALAI. ALAI is an organization that was created a couple of years ago, and we represent platforms and service providers operating here in Latin America. We are super pleased to have this first experience with ICTSD in conducting and talking about different aspects of the digital economy. Today we are going to start with what I think is probably one of the most important aspects or elements when we talk and think about the digital economy. Usually people think that, for example, the algorithms and technology is the brain. Now we are going to talk about the heart of the digital economy. That piece of that organ that is pumping the blood of the internet and the digital economy in our countries. And we are going to start talking about small and medium-sized enterprises and how they have an impact in the digital economy, and there are new aspects that we need to take care of when we talk about trade. To address this issue, this important issue to have today, we have a superb panel. I mean superb because it's not only composed by super bright people, but also it's a perfect mix of local experience in terms of what the platforms are doing here in Latin America in order to, one, being a platform here in Latin America, and two, provide services for the small and medium-sized enterprises that are integrated in the digital economy. And we have also experiences from different parts of the world, and we have big companies or major or big players providing services in 6 different continents, and we are going to talk with them about their experience and how these companies are, what they are doing in order to provide the digital economy and the small and medium-sized enterprises. So let me introduce the panel that we have today. We have, on my left, we have Matías Doublier. Matthies is a 24-year-old entrepreneur, co-founder and CEO of Increase, a company dedicated to empower business in LATAM and providing fintech solutions and connecting them together. We have also, to my following, Alan Elias. Alan is the Senior Manager of Global Public Policy at eBay, a member of the eBay Public Policy Lab with focus in the Americas. Since joining eBay in 2015, Elias has conducted in-depth analysis on data covering eBay activities around the world, and he has co-authored trade, economic, and geographic research on the eBay's global seller community. We have also with us Nicolas Bramble. Nicolas is the Deputy Head of Global Trade Policy at Google, where he has worked since 2013. Prior to joining Google, he was a Presidential Innovation Fellow and served as a lecturer and Director of the Law and Media Program at Yale Law School. Then we have Emilce Grimi. Emilce is the CFO of Workana, the first and largest freelance community in Latin America with over 25,000 small and medium-sized enterprises and 30,000 freelancers being every month on the platform. We have also Mr. Jerry Ho. Jerry is the founder of Olivia Premium, an organization that aims to provide 100% New Zealand-made products to children all around the world at reasonable prices. Over the years, 65% of the trade has been made through the e-commerce and web chat channels involving major players from China. And finally, we have Konstantin Matthies. Konstantin is an associate with Alpha Beta, a strategy and economics advisory business serving clients from the private, public, and non-for-profit sectors globally. Alpha Beta helps clients to identify the forces shaping their markets and develop practical plans to create prosperity and well-being. So, as you can see, and as I mentioned, this is a quite diverse panel in terms of experience, background, and the areas where they are covering. So, in order to go with this panel, we are going to advance in the following manner. We are going to have one round of interventions with the panelists. we are going to have some presentations, short presentations about some aspects and elements that they are developing, which might be explained in a better way through this presentation. And after the first round of interventions, we are going to open the mic shortly for a couple of questions if we have someone from the floor who is willing to take the opportunity to talk with our panelists. After that, we are going to have a second round of questions with the same dynamic. So let me start with perhaps with Alan, because Konstantin is going to present, Matthias is going to have a presentation at the end of this round because they are uploading the presentation. So let me start with you, Alan. We thought, and I mentioned that we have the experience of companies providing services, in different areas, different continents, with different culture. And eBay has allowed every person the ability to buy and sell an incredible wide range of goods, from clothes to electronics to cars to physical storefront, etc. With this activity, and everybody knows, and we are talking to this week at the WTO, that this is changing how economy is being shaping, and it's transcending international borders and changing the very own nature of global trade. So my question is, can you explain this new model of digital-enabled trade and the impact that independent micro and small business have?
Thank you very much. Okay.
Sorry, you have 6-7 minutes?
Okay, yeah. Perfect. So I think that's a great question. I think before really exploring why this change has occurred, I just want to touch on briefly kind of the traditional model of trade and globalization that has really dominated the landscape, since going back to the Industrial Revolution. I mean, this is a model that's really dominated by large companies, large factories, large container ships, large volumes. And under this model, really the only way for a micro and small enterprise to reach global customers was through global value chains. And this is also the model under which our global trade institutions and the infrastructure were established. And, this really isn't a problem. I don't want to make it sound like a problem. I think it made sense, I think, when really to engage in global trade, you had to be big because of the cost. But as Gonzalo said, an entirely new model of trade has really emerged in recent years that is now based on very small and micro enterprises, and possible because technology and specifically platforms have really dramatically reduced the cost of distance. And according to our estimates, the cost of distance is 6 times lower for international transactions over the online marketplace compared to the traditional market. It's kind of the brick and mortar market. At eBay, we refer to this new model of trade as the Global Empowerment Network. And it's something that is running parallel to the traditional model of trade. It's largely package-based and is really, as we're seeing, it's a very powerful vehicle for connecting the unconnected. And there are 4 key overlapping elements to the Global Empowerment Network. And the first is connectivity to the global internet at low cost and without gatekeepers. The second is global platform-based marketplaces, so your eBays of the world. The third is global payment services, something like PayPal. And the fourth is efficient, modern, and connected package-level logistics and delivery services. And really, I think with regard to impact, I think a theme that has emerged throughout our research over the last 5 to 6 years is that small is not necessarily the new big, but micro is the new global. And to that end, I think there are really 3 findings from our research that I think are the important takeaways. And if you were going to leave here with something, I think these are really the three things to remember. The online platform for commerce has allowed enterprises, no matter what size, from somebody who is by themselves working in their home, all the way up to someone with hundreds of employees, millions of dollars in sales, really to extend their reach from their locality or region to an unprecedented geographical area. This is really a 180-degree change in the way trade is occurring, and it's not a phenomenon on the margins. We are seeing it everywhere. The second takeaway is that the technology-enabled platform commercial model creates growth opportunities at the firm level across regions and in countries at different levels of development. And that's something I think I'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation. And finally, the economic activity of the micro and small businesses across our platform is not only reflective of a more inclusive model of commerce, but is also resulting in micro and small business growth and dynamism that exceeds that found in the traditional economy. So we are seeing sellers on eBay, their growth rate in sales is outpacing their local GDP. I also want to add that I think a crucial element provided by the Global Empowerment Network that also is fueling this expansive trade for independent micro and small and medium enterprises is trust. I think prior to the internet, you go back 25 years, the average person was not buying goods directly from merchants in countries on the other side of the world. Mainly because really, there was no way to really know if you were ever going to receive it. Provided that you could find out about the goods, it might be burdensome to make contact with the seller. You're not sure if you want to send a check, potentially overseas. Payments were difficult. And now, really, those barriers are kind of gone. I mean, there's so many different things you can use. You can use Skype, you can use email, you can use FaceTime. There's so many ways that you can connect with the merchant. You can, view other reviews left by sellers. And you can use electronic payments. So there are just a number of ways I think that, the internet is fueling trust and more comfort with making those global transactions. And just to close, I want to put a little bit of data, because I work in data. So I want to put a little bit of data behind kind of what I was talking about. And in July of this year, we released our annual Small Online Business Growth Report. And in this, we examine what we call eBay commercial sellers. So these are sellers that do $10,000 or more in sales. So not just profit, it's just sales on the eBay marketplace annually. And we looked at 18 countries across 6 continents, 9 in developing countries and 9 in advanced economies. And we found that among the full set of countries, all 18, slightly more than half had 100% export rates, meaning that every eBay commercial seller in these countries was an exporter. And in every country that we looked at, the rate of exporting by eBay commercial sellers dwarfed the rate of traditional businesses. I mean, for example, in the United States, I think the number is 97% of eBay commercial sellers are exporters, and only 1% of brick and mortar are exporters. And those numbers hold relatively the same across all the countries. You're looking at well above 90% and anywhere from the single digits to the very, very low double digits for traditional brick and mortars. In more than 3/4 of the countries we reviewed, the majority of eBay commercial sellers were selling to consumers on 4 or more continents. So think about that. I mean, that is a true global reach. So the majority of eBay commercial sellers in 3/4 of these countries were reaching 4 or more continents with their goods. And then finally, as I said earlier, in every country, sellers that reached the $10,000 threshold for the duration of our research period, which was 2011 to 2015, experienced a growth rate in sales that outpaced their home country's economic growth rate. So when you started by saying, the heart of the digital economy, I mean, I think these numbers truly back that up. Because these are, again, independent micro and small businesses throughout the entire world that are using the Global Empowerment Network to connect with global customers and to really kind of grow their businesses. And again, it's just in this really inclusive form of global commerce.
Sorry, Mike. Thank you very much. And when I was thinking about the heart of the digital economy, actually I was thinking of some of the data that you were showing in your report. For example, in the case of Chile, my country, according to with your report, 100% of the companies providing products on internet are exporting up to 28 different markets. That's a huge number for a Latin American country. If you compare, for example, according with the same report, companies that are offline, they're just exporting up to 3 different markets, and only 18% of those companies are exporting. When we think about the impact, in this kind of advances on the digital economy, especially for Latin America, when over the 70% or 80% of the laboral force is provided and is coming from the small and medium-sized enterprises, you perhaps will have an idea about what we are talking about and how and why it's so important, the things that Alan was mentioning here. So thank you very much. So, well, going to my left, now Nicolas Bramble from Google. I know that Google is also making a lot of efforts in order to bring small and medium-sized enterprises into the digital economy, and actually you have several plans and different studies going on this issue. So can you explain us a little bit more, about what is the perspective of a company like Google in this area?
Sure. Thanks, Gonzalo, for organizing this panel today, and thanks to the entire Trade and Sustainable Development Symposium. This is a really interesting set of events this week. And I think there's a lot of rhetoric sort of flying around in Buenos Aires, obviously, on trade, but not a lot of problem solving. So I'm hopeful that we can sort of talk about some more actionable steps that we're taking today to really empower small businesses globally to participate in trade. And, for all the reasons that Alan pointed out, this is a very new era we're moving into right now. And it's there's 850,000 SMBs in Argentina. There are millions in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a huge opportunity, I think, for many of these small and medium enterprises to really use digital tools to grow. But of course, there are roadblocks, and we shouldn't be all patting ourselves on the back and saying, well, digital has solved everything for these SMEs. We did some recent surveys, and we found some really sort of surprising stats, I thought. 57% of small businesses reported that they didn't have enough of a market insight into how to develop an expansion plan globally. 44% of them told us that translation was a prohibitive operational issue when they tried to do business on a global basis. And actually, this is reflected not just from the businesses, but from the consumers too. 72% of consumers said that they are more likely to buy a product if there's information in their own language. And 56% of those consumers said that having own language content is more important than price in determining whether or not to buy something. And of course, there are lots of other common difficulties out there that SMEs face, whether it's the availability of cross-border payments or customs clearance or dealing with VAT rules and tax rules and other kinds of regulations. And of course, enabling the flow of information too is just as critical for these small businesses as it is for many larger businesses today. Without data, without information, it's hard to imagine how a business can really take part in cross-border trade today. Yet the information and the data about how to engage in trade is all sort of separated into different buckets. Different governmental agencies have export guides, but they're all scattered around the world, and they're not standardized, they're not accessible, and they're still tailored for the world that Alan described, which is a world of large businesses, container shipping companies that can really know how to navigate the rules of trade. Meanwhile, the small businesses and really the micro businesses, single people, in their houses who want to export, they don't know what to do. So we're trying to basically solve that problem. And so rather than talk more, I wanted to sort of show what we're doing to really help SMEs from a global perspective. And don't just take my word for it. You can actually follow along if you want at a new tool we have called Market Finder. It's available at g.co/Market Finder, and it's basically a tool for developing export plans for small businesses around the world. So I think I have a few sort of slides that will show what this looks like in practice. I wanted to do a live demo, but then it's never good to sort of tempt the demo gods. So we're going to focus on the slides here instead. Right, so this is the tool. It's called Market Finder, and the idea is how do you build an export plan? How do you know where to export? You might know that you want to export. You might have a bunch of products that you think people around the world want, but where do they want it, and how do you get it to those people, and how do you get those services out into the world? So you can go on the slides here. So we looked at next slide, please. Cool. Okay, so yeah, going global in 3 steps. So this is a 3-step process. We want to make it easier for small businesses to find new opportunities around the world, then to plan their operations. How do you localize your website? How do you adapt your payments, et cetera? Then how do you actually build your brand? How do you market your business? How do you reach those new customers? And how do you follow up their customer support when they have problems, if they have problems with their products? And so I'm going to sort of talk about how this might apply to one example of a small business called Twiga, which is a Kenyan company that does a lot of really interesting stuff around mobile-based supply supplies to retail kiosks and other stores throughout Africa. In fact, they've shipped like 200 million bananas to kiosks around Africa in the last couple of years. So you can go to the next slide and we can talk about that. Have a clicker or something I can advance?
So, is there a clicker to?
I can just talk about it too, that's fine. Just keep going on the slides here. So basically how this works is if you're a small business, go ahead, next slide.
Next, please.
You don't need the slide, we can just talk about it. Okay, so here's the company I was talking about, Twiga. It's a company that is engaged in African retail and mobile business supply chains. And yet say they want to expand beyond their existing markets. Say they want to reach new markets abroad. What can they do on our platform? Next slide. So the way it works is they go to our website, Market Finder, g.co/Market Finder, and you type in your website. If you have a website, you can put it in here. If you don't have a website, we'll help you create one, obviously. And then once you upload your website, we'll pull from that content a bunch of categories that we think you're trying to sell or where you could sell abroad. Next slide. Right, so here's how it works. I guess the demo gods are angry today. Next slide. Anyway, the way it works is we will give you a list of markets where we think that people are searching for your content around the world. And the idea here is let's use some of the data that we've compiled through Google search to understand where there's latent demand for your product in different countries. And so the way it works for a company like Twiga, next slide, is that we will give you a bunch of recommendations for countries as to where you might be able to sell your products. And we'll give you a lot more information too. How many people in those countries have access to the internet? How many of those people have a working internet connection? What's the business climate like in those countries? And how easy is it to process payments? If you want to actually sell stuff in those countries, how easy is it for you to get the payments out of those countries? And then once you choose your markets, then we'll provide very personalized recommendations as to how to go and enter into those markets. And there's a localization page and a series of country guides that we provided via this service, including translation software, that lets you figure out exactly how to tell your product offerings in those countries. And what else do you see? There are many barriers and obstacles to becoming a global trading entity if you're a small business, but the 6 biggest ones we think are around payments, recruitment, localization, logistics, and a few other areas. And so there's a lot of data out there that I think can really help small businesses understand how to navigate these burdens. And we've tried to bring it into the site. We've pulled data from the WTO, from international, from ITC, and from a number of other government agencies. We put this onto the website for you to really help you understand what it is you need to do to become an exporter. And then once you're through that process, and you can go to the next slide here. I think we got them back now. Maybe not. You can do things like really understand how to build out your marketing campaign in these other countries. And we'll provide you a bunch of key resources. And yeah, here's a great example. So you start typing in, and we'll provide you what we think it is that you can sell in these countries exactly. And we'll provide you tools to reach those other countries. And I really encourage everybody here to actually use this website and understand how it works, because I think it's a really fascinating attempt to figure out less about what are the sort of high-level rules of the road we need in digital trade, and more about what are the things that small businesses really, really need when they want to go global. And I think this is a first attempt at solving this problem, and a lot more that we can do, a lot more that other companies can do, I think, to really give these kinds of hands-on resources to small businesses around the world. And we really encourage everybody here to give us feedback. We want to learn. We want to know what more data and what more resources we could use to really improve this product. And we want to make it as easy as possible, if you're a small business, if you're a single person anywhere in the world, to become a global trader, just as if you were a large business. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Is it in English only?
No, it's translated, I think, into someone in the audience will know better. I think it's...
I think it's work in progress.
Yeah.
It should be in
Right, I think we're trying to translate into up to 50 languages.
Okay. Again, here. Sorry. Mike, please. Are you listening? Okay, I'm so sorry. Well, this is also work in progress, apparently, what we are doing in terms of the presentation. So thank you very much, Nick, for the patience. And I think that is super relevant because we hear about small and medium-sized enterprises doing business all over the world. Education is one of the most important elements, not only education in terms of how to deal, navigate with the huge amount of forms, papers, and formularies that they need to fulfill in order to export, but also the same barrier that they face in different markets where when we are doing, they are doing that. Specifically here in Latin America, for example, to move one single package from Mexico till it could take 4 months, only in terms of the amount of forms that you need to fulfill. So these kind of tools, and that was the purpose of the question, obviously helps in that way. Now we are going to mix your presentation with Emil Sigrini from Workana. Workana is a platform providing service here in Latin America, and I think that Workana is a perfect complement of what we heard from eBay and Google in terms of how to act globally and to provide services in a cross-border manner. So perhaps, Emilce, can you explain a little bit about what Workana is doing and how you facilitate small and medium-sized enterprise to go into internationalization?
I don't know. Okay. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very happy of being here today and telling you all about Workana. Workana is an online marketplace for remote and digital work. We connect freelancers with clients, and we are leaders in Latin America. Our market share is around 75%, and we think that is because we play locally. We have the same language, we speak the same language, the communication is easier, we have similar culture, and we have payments in local currency. So we talk about freelance economy like the future of work, and the freelance economy, also known as a factor of the fourth industrial revolution. According to the last survey in the United States, in 10 years from now, 50% of the United States workforce will be freelancers. So where is Latin America? The industry here is very, very young, but we have a huge potential, which is accelerating by the new generations. When the millennials, these new generations, are going to enter to the workforce, of course, they are going to get advantage of all the benefits of being a freelancer. So with Workana, we help freelancers to have access to regional clients. Technology enables a professional to access to shops no matter where freelancers live. The freelancers, the main benefits of being a freelancer are freedom and flexibility. You can do what project do you want, when you want, and wherever you are. It doesn't matter if you want to have, for example, a quiet life and live in a small city by the sea. You can be a freelancer, have a career, a professional career, and mix that two things. So we have thousands of stories like this. It's not important to move into a big city for having a professional career. So there are 30,000 of freelancers, active freelancers, bidding every month in our platform. And we have, on the other side, the clients, these small companies. Clients in need of professionals to complete projects. Workana has attracted so far 25,000 of clients who had posted over 200,000 projects during this year. This platform, Workana, provides to these clients access to a workforce, to talent, quickly and flexible, with a competitive advantage over the others. Focus on growing, so they can focus on growing they can focus on scaling. And they have access to a new entire workforce. No reference needed. It's not, you don't have to live or stay near a freelancer. You just, the marketplace, our platform, is doing that for you. So clients choose to work with platforms because it enables to organize themselves, to standardize their projects. And for example, a company needs to know how to advertise. So they hire Freelancer through Urkena and to manage an AdWords campaign. In our case, we translate all our website in Brazil to Portuguese using Freelancers, for example. And finally, Urkena is itself a small company. We are 36 people making it happen every day. And we use, of course, digital tools provided by other companies like Google, for example, to access to new clients, Mercado Pago or PayPal to make payments. So this is a big value chain.
Thank you, Emilce. I think what is great about Workana is how you fill the gap between offer and demand, and you offer a new technology solution to do that. And you are also cooperating in bringing professionals to small and medium-sized enterprises that usually don't have the money to hire an expensive professional to conduct a project. So I think it's super good, and it's an important tool for what we are talking today. Thank you, Emilce. So Jerry Ho. Jerry, Olivia Premium is doing something which is also great, which is offering products, New Zealand products to reasonable prices to different parts of the world. But in that regard, what are the tools, the technical tools that you use to operate your business on a global basis or to reach different markets and to do what you're doing?
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to sit here and share with you my story. And I'm very lucky. I wear two hats. At the same time, I'm working for the APAC MSME Trade Coalition. We are aiming to promote cross-border trade and digital economies across APAC region. So if you can check out www.tradecoalition.org, there are a lot of cool stuff to check out with. And also, I'm the deputy chair of a small business advisory group to New Zealand government. So in terms of regulatory side, I do have a say in terms of policy making. On the right-hand side, I am a business owner that we start with nothing, and now we're turning over multi-million dollars in terms of international sales. So all the hurdles and questions and issues with SMEs, we have been through it. So I sit here and share with you the blood heart story in terms of how we grow, but how we actually utilize internet and technologies to enable us to go global, which is so much easier nowadays rather than before. So Olivia, I named it after my daughter, my eldest daughter called Olivia, and she is 7 years old, and that means my company is 6.5 years old. And we target children from 3 to 12 in 3 different categories. We do FMCG products, ranging from cereals, cookies, and milk powders, and also from health products, we have probiotics, vitamins, and stuff like this. And skincare products, last but not least. We use a very different models to operate globally. We manufacture most of our products in New Zealand, and we have some of our products made in Australia, and we found why not establish ourselves in Australia, and then vice versa, we will be able to trade bilaterally. And then actually that extended. We are manufacturing some health products in India at the moment. We're looking at Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia at the same time. We would like to use that as a multilateral relationship between Olivia, which will be able to enable us to A, save for logistics, B, for distributions and finding for partners that actually save us a lot of time, cost, and money. and we found that really useful for us. Then we do not only do cross-border trade, we do general trade to China. China is 70% of our business. We do general trade, free trade zones, and also direct postage from New Zealand or any other ways from the world. So how do we do it? Basically, there are 3 letters that you have to remember if you do business in China in the internet era. It's called B-A-T. B for Baidu. I'm sorry, Google, but Google is not available in China, but it's dominated by Baidu. Consumers are doing a lot of research nowadays before they actually pick up and click on the button to select the product. So basically, we have to do proper Baidu SEOs, in terms of their wikis, in terms of our company profiles, and we have to make sure that is when they search relevant keywords, we are going to be displayed there. That's number 1. 2, A, which is Alibaba. Jack Ma has happened to speak tomorrow. I would like to be there because he actually helped me a lot. In Taobao and Tmall on Single Man's Day, which is the 11th, we just passed a month ago. The sales in total is $20 billion USD in one day, one country only. And I'm lucky enough, I turned over $1 million RMB on that day, which is not too bad for us as a small business. Also T, it's called Tencent. Tencent is WeChat. So, we used to call QQ, but now we use WeChat. The power of that is not only sales, it's also marketing as well. Because the power of a Instagram-like viral spread of people sponsor you, they are your fans of your products. They actually publish up to 9 images on their friends' circle with descriptions. People can buy off them through WeChat, pay via WeChat. They could actually create a 10 seconds small video in terms of promotion via WeChat. So this is phenomenal for us. 1 to 10, my policy is I influence 10 people and I ensure they influence another 10 people. And that actually, it's a free, somehow, marketing for us, and then it's based on trust. That actually eliminate a lot of difficult, ideas in terms of product selections, because your friend suggested this is a good product to buy. We loved it. We use Tencent a lot. But in China, because of the regulation itself, we have to enable different levels of payment methods. Sometimes we use PayPal to Southeast Asia. We use AliExpress from free trade zones or international registered company in China. We use WeChat to do a lot of trading as well. Of course, we use TT, telegraphic transfer for large item transfers. Also, we use platforms like eBay and Amazon that actually enable us to reach other parts of the world and also some parts of China. Luckily, Amazon just launched in Australia that actually enhance our products spread in terms of speed a lot faster. We use SaaS, software as services, a lot. That's why SME love them, because we don't have to have fancy hardware. Things are already there and they regularly update it and they send patch with no notice. They just update it. So in terms of Xero, a very beautiful designed software, accounting software that is agile focused. It's very flexible that we can use. We can add on payrolls. We can add on PAYE tax related inventory, and also Parcelport. Parcelport is another distribution platform that we use to distribute our products. How it works is a aggregator website that connects to all the parcel deliveries companies. And it's a bidding system in terms of weight and your parcel size. You click, there is a bidding system in terms of price and speed. You select it, and they come over and pick it, and same-day delivery. So basically, they create a very healthy, competitive environment for distribution. In terms of cost saving for small business, fantastic. Also, we use because we use Alibaba, JD.com, the beauty of that is not even just the platform itself, it's just the service. What actually you can increase the value of the platform is to buy off their true data. It's not blue sky data, it's consumer behavior, finished transaction data. I've used a lot of adjectives, but basically this is value for money data. We can actually use that as business intelligence. We feed them back to our R&D team. In terms of product development, it's right there. We're very close to what our consumer wants. And also you can actually see the trend of what my consumer is going to buy. So in terms of that, we found internet and technologies that enable us to go a lot further from New Zealand to Southeast Asia. It helped us big time. It saved a lot in terms of time, human resource input, and also capital input as well. But we'll talk about the hurdles later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Wow, it's quite remarkable, the flexibility that you are mentioning. And when we think about small and medium-sized enterprises and to have this different range of tools providing you services and different options, and when we think and when we say that the digital economy, one of the positive aspects that we have is how low are the barrier of entry for companies providing services and products on internet. And this is the perfect example. You mentioned at least 5 technologies and different providers to do what you are doing on a global scale, which is quite remarkable. So thank you. So we are going to have a last minute change here because I hear that you, Konstantin, have a presentation.
I think so.
We are working on that. So
Fingers crossed.
yeah. In order to be effective with that, we are going to go first with Matthias Doublier from Increase Card, and then we are going to finish the first round with you, Konstantin. So
great.
let's finger crossed. So Matthias, please tell us a little bit more about what you are doing and how you use a company like yours use technology in order to affect in a positive way the financial side of the small and medium-sized enterprises. What are the things that you are doing and what is your experience operating in different countries in Latin America?
Okay, how are you? Good. Let me start with an MIT study. There is an MIT study for everything, so I wanted to start with one. It says that when a new technology launches or when a new technology appears, it takes up to 4 years to a normal person to understand the technology. And it takes up to 10 years to the government to create a law. 4 years to a person, 10 years for a government. Alan and Nick talks about payments. And I think that when you think to sell online, the first thing that you are going to think is how I am going to receive the money. I am going to receive the money in my bank account. I have a bank account. I'm a merchant in Latin America. I prefer a bank account. So at Increase, I'm going to explain what we do with an example. Imagine that you are Gustavo and you have a merchant, a shop in the middle of Argentina, in Catamarca, one of our provinces. Because you have a shop, you need to accept credit cards. In Argentina, each merchant accepts like 8 different credit cards. Visa, Master, Amex, and a lot of local credit cards. Each province in Argentina has her own credit card. Each credit card has different payment schedules. Suppose I go and pay with credit card, you're going to receive the payment 25 days after. I pay with installments, you're going to receive the payment maybe 1 year after, in each installment. So you are a merchant, you need to go online, and you don't know how much you're going to receive because you have different discounts, different taxes, perceptions, withholdings, and when you're going to receive that money. You have technology, you could sell online, but when you're going to receive that money. Some merchants puts a letter in the door and say, only cash. And that's a reality in Argentina and in Latin America. We help merchants to understand how and when and how much they are going to receive. We are connected directly to all the credit cards and providing information for merchants. We have 17,000 merchants now in Argentina. Biggest client as Latam, Shell, Nike, and small clients at Gustavo in the middle of Argentina. Some of our merchants does not have internet connection in their stores. Now, today, they don't have internet connection in their stores. So they go to a friend, use their computer and say, hey, I go through increase, I check when I'm going to receive that money, and then I go back to the store. So we think that the only way to help that type of merchants, that are a lot in Latin America, is to create technology that understand how they think. Is create technology that understand how the Latin American merchants think, and provide them solutions that not only give one part of the ecosystem, is to provide solution that helps in all the aspects of the merchant. Square is doing something really good in the United States with the dongle and with the market and with they are giving loans to merchants. Mercado Libre is trying to do the same here. We need an ecosystem for merchants in Latin America. Because if one platform could provide them a lot of solutions, maybe from different providers, but only in one platform, you can help them to understand the technology and not have that gap of 4 years or 5 years or over 6 years. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Well, I think that you are doing a great job. And let me tell you why it's important here, for example, Latin America. If you think in a big country like Mexico, probably the second largest economy here in Latin America, only 28% of the adult population has access to a credit card or a bank account. So you take out of the digital economy immediately more than 70% of the population. Platforms like Increase are helping to solve that issue and to provide different kind of solutions to people that is currently out of the digital economy. And that's why it's important to have this kind of platforms and the flexibility in terms of the regulatory framework to keep it on and to provide this kind of services. We are going to talk about a little bit more later on the second round of interventions, but thank you very much, Matías, again. I think it's great. So having said that, I was crossing my fingers during the last 3 minutes, and let's hope that your presentation, Konstantin, is going to work. So, Konstantin, go ahead, please.
I have a clicker. There we go. Okay. And the clicker does not work, but the presentation is there. So, that's something. Thank you so much, first of all, to all my fellow panelists for sharing their insight, and especially to the business owners and the SMEs that have shared here today, because I think those kind of stories are really what get at the heart of the issue of how important digital is to SMEs. And I think if down the road there was an availability to share some of those stories down the road with some of the ministerial conference, I think that would be really impactful to show what is actually at stake here when we're talking about regulation of digital and of trade. And in that manner, what we have done, so I'm with Alpha Beta, which is a strategy and economic consultancy based out of Singapore and Sydney. And we supported the AMTC on a piece of research that they did, because those were exactly the kind of questions that they wanted to answer. What is the value at stake here? So how much is digital actually providing in benefits to MSMEs when we're looking at their export capability? And then how can we shape, or how can we address the regulation around this, because actually MSMEs are not being really fully considered when it comes to regulation. And that's a topic that's come up in lots of panels today, the panels I've been sitting in, that really MSMEs are lacking the voice. And that's what so the executive summary of this work is outside for you to pick up. I'm happy to ask any questions on that. But I was hoping in the meantime that there we go. Okay, great. So just to give a little bit of background, Jerry already mentioned it. The AMTC's objectives really are to help its members grow their businesses beyond their borders as well, so outside within their domestic markets. Connect the members with the tools that are needed to compete with larger companies and effectively level the playing field against larger competitors, but also level the playing field across the region by working with governments to make it easier for MSMEs to take part in the global economy. And this piece of research, why was the AMTC interested in looking at that? Well, it was because, first of all, MSMEs, as we know, and as we've heard already some data points from eBay and Google, that MSMEs are vital for the economic growth and trade in Asia Pacific and in the world. A huge stakeholder in the global economy. The problem is that most MSMEs still face significant barriers to trade and to export. And the third bit is, well, digital technologies, as we've heard, and we've heard the first 10 examples here, they lower the export barriers and they transform the way business is done across barriers and across countries for MSMEs. And the fourth bit is that we really want to address with the, in the background of this venue and the conference going on down the road, is that sound regulation of digital trade is crucial for MSME success and for them being able to continue to reap the benefits of digital. And the key thing is this report is kind of supposed to give a fact base and give a voice to MSMEs in this really important issue. These are just some key highlights of the research that I wanted to share with you here. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail. There's more if you pick up the executive summary. But in terms of the benefits of digital, we looked at the time savings and we looked at the cost savings for MSMEs engaged in exporting, and the time savings from digital technologies or internet-enabled technologies. And what you guys already described sort of in first hand, this kind of puts like a solid fact base to it that you can put in front of the regulator and kind of tell them. And I know the eBay report mentioned some numbers as well, where eBay looked at sort of, how online versus offline does it. Here we're looking particularly at exports. So one of the huge numbers that we have here, so 82% cost reduction for exporting costs from leveraging digital tools. And actually, when we looked at service providers, 65% that actually comes from more efficient marketing solutions. On the other hand, though, the time savings are also absolutely significant and large. 29% reduction in time from MSMEs exporting through digital tools. And a big chunk of the time savings actually comes from operational savings, at the back end through cloud, be it cloud solutions, be it voice over IP, these kind of things that really help you manage your business better and cutting down significant costs. Now, the regulatory challenges facing MSMEs in APAC and in APAC in particular, but also more globally, the ones that we highlighted here are around the red tape impacting market access, and a lot of that has to do with the requirement of local registration or setting up local shop. Copyright issues about striking that balance between protecting IP but also giving fair usage policies to people in the digital space wanting to use content creatively. Intermediary liabilities, we've heard a lot about platforms, the liability for what users are doing online on platforms and how businesses, what platforms are responsible for and what can reasonably be expected of them to check. And the last one being around cross-border data restrictions. So, and I'm going to get into this in a minute because most people will probably go like, well, this doesn't seem like the first thing that would be on every MSME's mind. But we picked these for quite particular reasons. And just to summarize, the opportunities are really around trying to minimize border frictions, making it as easy as possible for MSMEs to go across borders, building flexibility into copyright and intermediate liability regulations, trying to strike that balance between protecting but also allowing fair usage, and ensuring open information flows. And we'll touch on these in a bit more detail, and also we're going to have some nice examples that sort of go into a bit more detail and try to flesh out the heart, as my fellow panelists have already done earlier. Yeah, great. So just to touch on, I don't want to dwell on this, but we know MSMEs are superbly important for the economic activity and trade in Asia Pacific. So 96% of businesses in APAC are MSMEs. They provide 62% of employment. They also provide 42% of export value, but that's already, you can kind of see how it is as you move towards the trade. There's still a large opportunity. And we already talked about the barriers earlier. I think it was mentioned at several points. You know, you see the kind of things you would expect of that: language and cultural gaps, having difficulties identifying market opportunities abroad, finding business partners. But one of the big things that comes up in services, so this is from the Future of Business Survey, which was just conducted this year, regulation comes up again and again. And regulatory red tape and, you know, complying with regulation that is overly complex and trying to understand in your new markets how things differ, that is a huge barrier to export for MSMEs. So this is just breaking down the cost savings and how we looked at this. And what we looked at in terms of cost savings, we looked at the export value chain, which is really around market research. So what is my market? How do I enter my market? Marketing and insurance and financing. And these three we grouped under market entry activities when it comes to exporting. And the other three areas that we looked at are around regulatory compliance, distribution, and operational support, so which could be summed up under foreign market operating costs. And we looked at, so your run-of-the-mill MSME manufacturer and services. And we looked at micro firms, small firms, and medium-sized firms. And the kind of savings you see here are obviously quite staggering amount. You know, when we hear your stories and when we go through this, that's not surprising, right? It's kind of, you can tell this is having a huge impact. So you have the 82% that I mentioned earlier for services. But the interesting thing is actually that the vast part of the initial savings comes from the market entry savings. Actually, before you actually enter the market, there's a huge component that in cost that can already be reduced by leveraging digital. And we're really, what I want to mention is we focused on businesses that would have operated traditionally before, and so we did that direct comparison between traditional business and digital business. So this doesn't even include the benefits this has contributed to businesses that are digital first. Think about your e-commerce. Think about the app economy, which is, you know, 22 billion in APAC, I think in 2015, as much as was sold on Singles Day. So that is not even looking at this. We're explicitly looking only at, you know, businesses that would have operated traditionally versus digitally first. So, as I mentioned, you know, we have the 4 policy issues that the paper looks at, and just to explain why these were picked, right? So, one of the key things is they are the core relevance to the ongoing trade discussions taking place, especially when we're talking about red tape impacting market access and cross-border data restrictions. You know, that's really at the core of a lot what the talks are when it comes to the digital economy and trade. These issues have largely been seen only impacting large firms. So whenever there's a discussion around these kind of issues, you know, eBay comes up, Facebook comes up, Google comes up, but actually they're very, very important for MSMEs as well, especially for digitally first MSMEs. And that's not being mentioned. So in that case, what I said, this report is really about giving MSMEs a voice in this ongoing discussion. And while these issues may not be front of mind right now for a lot of MSMEs, the more digital they become and the more they move into the digital economy, the more it's going to be front of mind for them going forward. So just touching on each of these areas, I'm going to try to make this as relatable as possible because throughout this research we talked to a lot of MSMEs. And so, you know, when we looked at domestic registration that threatens sort of economies of scale, it can add significantly cost if an MSME has to incorporate in another country. So one of the companies we talked to, for example, Identity Wings, Australia-based software company for medical records. And when they moved into the Indian markets, and over 90% of their business now comes from the Indian market. But initially they ran a local office there, which was hugely costly for them. But because of digital solutions, they could now run remotely and use that budget to hire freelancers in the market. So thereby massively cutting down their costs. And they said if they had to go back to something like having a local office in India, it effectively would break their business model. They could not supply at the cost that they do right now. So when we look at this around red tape impacting market access. It's really about minimizing the border frictions. We need to find alternatives to enforce local establishment when trying to regulate importers. And there's good reasons why you would want to regulate importers. And there's good reasons why you want, maybe to, get a better grip on them and better strong. But the local enforcement or the local establishment enforcement cannot be one, because for MSMEs it's just often not feasible. So copyright, I mentioned it before, striking that balance between protecting people's IP, protecting content creators' IP, but also supplying fair usage. Very interesting MSME. We talked to a Taiwanese stop motion animation studio, their YouTube channel, and they use a lot of, your fix of Lego figurines with Harry Potter and Star Wars and everything, and they make kind of cool movies with it. And it's all great. But, if they weren't able to use the licensed characters, they say they basically, wouldn't be in operation or successful, right? Because obviously a lot of their viewership relies on using these licensed characters. The other way around, though, for example, they have a huge following in China. And since, YouTube is not available there, they actually rely on people effectively copying their content and putting it on other websites. But they're like, well, we know so successful, people will eventually come and find our YouTube channel and find the source of it. So striking that balance is really, really important. Intermediary reliability. So this is a very, very important issue. Making sure that platforms, to some extent, have a sort of detachment of the liability of what being said on it. And this, intermediary liability becomes really important because it is about important things. We're talking about, trying to clamp down on hate speech and these kind of things. So it is an important issue. But on the other hand, what has been done, and jurisdictions have done well with this, is about these kind of safe harbors conditions that have sort of kept platforms from, potential punishment and thereby letting them innovate. We talked to several platforms actually, but this particular one, Mouth Shut, they said they have a full legal team that they would need a full legal team that would just be dealing with these kind of things with you. If someone gave a bad review of a business on their website, and that would be legally challenged. They would not be able, if they were completely responsible for all their content, they would not be able to operate in the most efficient way that they're doing right now. And the last bit is around the restrictions of cross-border data. So that obviously, again, this is a discussion that almost exclusively is happening at the larger level. We're almost exclusively talking about larger companies when this regulation is discussed, but actually for a lot of MSMEs, this is becoming really important. The company we're mentioning there, Pegasus, Singapore company, property management service platform. They basically, if you need gardening services for your condo and stuff, these contracts, they put them on their platform, operate them. They want to break into the Indonesian market, and they say if we have to store our data locally, that means we are going to have to rely on Indonesian data centers. Now, the Indonesian data centers are just not as sophisticated, or the market is a lot more nascent than, for example, in Singapore. So we're going to experience latency issues. We're not going to be able to hold up the quality service that we're providing at the moment. So this is a real issue that even a small micro business is facing. So just to recap the main messages, digital technologies have potential to transform export capabilities of MSMEs. They're hugely important, as we've seen. But poorly designed digital trade regulation, there's a risk of actually undermining these benefits. And 3 imperatives are important when you're thinking about future regulation: minimizing border frictions, building flexibility into copyright and intermediate liability regulations, and ensuring open data flows. Thank you.
No, thank you. I was tempting to say before, 5 minutes ago, that was too much time, but the things that you were mentioning are so important and transcendent, fundamental to understand what we are talking about here. For example, we had a conversation with Argentinian authorities, some other actors here in the morning, and some of them tried to explain what is the key or the magical recipe to have something like growing in terms of digital economy. And we were talking about different elements, but when we think about it, Those four elements that Konstantin was mentioning are the usual suspects in terms of if you address well and in a proper manner those elements, probably you are going to have some kind of success in driving your public policies in order to increase the digital economy. And that's linked with what Matthias was mentioning in terms of how regulation and the velocity of regulation, because the adoption of technology is so much faster than the adoption in terms of from a regulatory point of view. Having said that, we are in a dilemma here because we have 15 minutes, and I promise a second round of interventions. But I have a solution here. Let me ask you the same question to every one of you, and let's give us 2 minutes to try to address it, because it's going to be easier because some of the issues you mentioned it before. So what are the top challenges when you think how to bring small and medium-sized enterprises to the digital economy? What are the challenges that you have experienced during the last year working from your companies or sectors? And one of two possible ways of solving them. It's going to be a technological solution. It's going to be a trade solution. Please elaborate a little bit more about it. So since I start with you, Alan.
So well, one of the challenges that I want to discuss, and I think I want to put in the context of kind of empowering the micro and small to export, is really kind of the complex customs systems, and when you're a micro business, independent, one person, two people, three people, you just don't simply have the resources to navigate complex customs in terms of shipping your goods. Often when you're just simply going to the post office, or using FedEx, UPS, or another carrier, and then just, filling out the forms and shipping. And I think that really, we would encourage really thinking about the value of extreme simplification in terms of tax and regulatory regimes at the borders. And, again, the paperwork can be time-consuming, the procedures can be time-consuming, and, the main reason that the micro and small are encountering this problem is that the customs de minimis levels are kind of kept low throughout most of the world. The United States is $800. When you look at a lot of other countries, they're well below $200. And this is the value under which a good can come in the country and not be assessed duties or customs. And so, we would really encourage countries to look at that and look at raising their de minimis levels. It helps their sellers too, in terms of, when sellers don't have to pay duties on returns. A number of our sellers import products as inputs to their products, and then again it benefits consumers as well. So I think that's a key challenge we're looking at, and a key message I think for, especially at this forum for governments, is to really look at that, and you're going to be really helping and further empowering these independent micro and small businesses.
Thank you very much. That's super interesting. So I'm not going to add any more at this round because I don't want to steal the show. So let's set another rule. I'm going to say 1 minute when you have 1 minute. Okay? So Nick, same question. What are the challenges?
45 seconds. So I think a lot of the policy things that Konstantin and Alan outlined are exactly right. That we do want to have the right kind of interoperable policy framework in place that allows you to go to any country, not just nearby ones. But I guess it's also a mindset question, I think. Many small businesses, I think, see themselves, when they begin to export, they see themselves as local companies that happen to have a few international customers. And I think we want to figure out ways to get them to see themselves as international companies with local customers and providing all the sort of customer care and customer support that a local company would supply to their customers. And I think that's part of the reason we developed this tool, is to sort of give small businesses the ability to reconceptualize themselves and to go through the process and figure out exactly what it takes to portray themselves and to become international companies. Even if you have only 2 or 3 people on staff, we think this tool, Market Finder, which actually, if you want to go downstairs, there's a booth where we can provide some more hands-on guidance as to how to use this tool. We think this is the right way to think about how to sort of transform that mindset.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, Emilce?
One of the biggest barriers, challenges that we have in Burkina was about global payments and how to give different options to our freelancers and clients, cheaper options and faster. And sometimes countries don't understand that we are in a global economy and countries' barriers are difficult to surpass. And with services and across borders, it's very important to have these payment facilities. And this was the main challenge that we have to face.
Thank you, Milce. So, Jerry, it's going to be a technology challenge, it's going to be a trade challenge.
Trade challenge.
Okay.
Of course, they talked about technology. I talk about trade. So from an MSME perspective, I'm going to nail it to the very pain point. Is looking for a trusted partner overseas. It's really, really hard. So you have to culturally, business culture has to be aligned, and also they are has to be some sort of a similar size like yourself. That cannot be a big misalignment between a big partner and also you are being an MSME. It will fall, it will collapse at some point because of connectivities or understandings or market expectation. And that rule of thumb is to go, don't show your cards at once, just try to not give out exclusivity. Try to try them out 3 months, 6 months, and then try out the relationship, just like dating. And then another one is copyright. Remember, IP is going to be your next, or it's your most important asset of your company if you go global. So ensure to think creative in terms of your IP. Like myself, being Olivia, when you try to register through Chinese registration trademark office, how many Olivia is going to be there? And I use a bear as my logo. So think about that. It took me like 3 years. I just got the new trademark registered in China. So think creative. And then, at least you go over a lot of hurdles. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Matthias?
As Nick says, for me, it's a mindset problem. But it's a mindset problem that goes cross. Go cross governments, go cross merchants, go cross big companies, go cross startups. So the only way to solve this problem is to put together on the same table governments, startups, big companies as Google, as eBay, and small merchants, and talk together and figure out which is the best way to go through this problem, because this problem constantly changes. And if you only create a solution for one problem, tomorrow you're going to have another problem. So the international trade is more to be open to talk and more to be open to a space like this to try to figure out how we could solve the problems.
Thank you very much. I cannot avoid to say that you are talking about a mechanism to solve problems more than solving problems case by case. Okay, good. Konstantin?
So what Matthias just mentioned is really important. I think it's this disconnect between regulators, startups, and multinationals to an extent. I think the challenge that sort of we see working a lot with digital products is that it's important to have this partnership, that these stakeholders come together, and often also just simple things as explaining how the benefits are created, how products are helping. I've, over the last couple of years, worked a lot on digital technologies and in the regulatory space, and regulators often, they just don't understand fully what, the impact is of a particular technology. And as we've seen today, these kind of things, this is where, MSMEs or multinationals can come in and kind of explain, well, this is how it helps, and this is what's on, the issue that's on the table. So I think that's really important, that we're moving towards a more partnership model and less of an adversarial model in these discussions. And then the second thing I just want to highlight is around data. I think our understanding of data and data as a commodity is going to significantly change over the next couple of years, and the way it's said, and this is going to massively impact also with trade and when we're thinking about how data moves across countries, who owns the data. And that's, I think, a challenge that we're going to have to deal with very, very quickly, very soon.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, because that's going to have an impact on technologies providing solutions for small and medium-sized enterprise, all kind of enterprises. I mean, talking about cloud and how you move data across different regions and countries is going to be essential here, because that's going to be a barrier that we are need to pull down in order if we are going to bring small and medium-sized enterprises here. Thank you very much. So I think that we are just about time to close this panel. I don't know if there is an urgent question from the floor for the panelists. Otherwise, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this opportunity and give a round of applause for the panelists.